Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to Coco and Daltz. I'm not Daltz.
And I'm not Coco.
You sound so much better at that than I do.
No, I don't.
I think we've done this intro before, actually. If you're in the U.S., welcome. It is a long holiday weekend. It is Black Friday. Black like my cold black heart. And
wait, what? Left turn.
You're not going to discover that until we've been together for a few more years. So.
Wow.
Wow, yeah.
That is ominous. That has a basic instinct kind of feel to it.
Ominous like Widows,
Oh.
which we are going to review for you today.
Smooth segue.
Also ominous like the second season of Goliath, which we are going to leave till the end, but not ominous like Bohemian Rhapsody, which we're going to kick today's podcast episode off with. Tell me, Daltz, what did you think about Bohemian Rhapsody?
Well, thunderbolts and lightning, they're very, very frightening.
They are if you're my dog, who's also named Coco, yes.
Galileo.
Galileo Figaro. Are we going to have to pay Queen royalties now that we're...
No, I said it. I didn't sing it. So I think
right.
we're okay if it's like spoken word type stuff.
Well, to be safe, why don't we move on?
So I liked Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie.
Mm-hmm. Not the song?
I like the song in a novelty kind of way.
Okay.
And in a, like, hey, you get points for trying different stuff.
Right.
Like Big Audio Dynamite or 21 Pilots, you know, to maybe put a little bookend there, you know, from earlier to later. But the movie itself was like I don't know, it was fine. It was good. It was a good made-for-TV production.
I would agree with that.
The music was great, but the movie, I think, didn't have anything to do with the music. Like, the music existed long before the movie. Mm-hmm. So you have music that tells the story of the movie. You sort of don't really have any choice but to be good in that regard, if that makes any sense. It's not like the movie was... it's not like they generated the music for the movie.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The music was always there. So they had basically the parameters to set up the movie. Just fill in the blanks a little bit along the way, and you have a movie. So it was good. It was fine. What did you think?
I felt the same way. I'd heard so much positive about it before we saw it that I was expecting it to be better than it was. The final scene where they recreated the Live Aid set was spectacular.
Yeah, that was good.
I really enjoyed that.
That was enjoyable. Yeah.
That was definitely the best part of the entire movie.
Well, and I felt some tension there, and I felt a little bit of anxiety, and, you know, like what you're supposed to feel in that situation. Uh-huh. And so that was, yes, I like that scene very much.
Yeah, but the rest of the movie, I definitely agree with your assessment. It felt like a made-for-TV movie. It felt very like, well, here's the scene where Freddie meets the other Queen guys, and here's the scene where they find out that an agent is interested in them. Like it wasn't like a natural organic flow. It was very much like individual set pieces,
right?
At least
little chapters.
Yeah. It did feel kind of choppy. I did think the guy who played Freddie Mercury. Actually, I felt like all the actors did really good jobs, especially like the guy who played Brian May and the guy who played
and they're
Roger
all
Taylor.
dead ringers, by the way.
Oh,
they
my
all
God, right?
very much look like
Right.
Queen. Like, it almost seems to me they were cast for their looks more than their acting skill.
But they were still...
But they really fit the parts. They really did a good job acting.
Yeah, the only thing I will say about I don't know how to pronounce his name, so I'm going to say Rami Malek is...
It's probably a better attempt than I would make. Let's just put it that way.
He did a very distracting thing where he kept sucking on his prosthetic teeth.
Yes.
It was very distracting.
And even though that's what Freddie Mercury did in a lot of interviews and stuff like that, it still seemed like it was artificial.
Yeah.
Like, it still seemed like he was putting it on. And we got the whole point of the teeth. Mm-hmm. There was a couple of references in the story and the dialogue and everything like that. So
about having extra molars or whatever.
Yeah. And so we got that point, and we got the, you know, when he first meets Roger Taylor and the other guy, Brian May. when they first meet and the guys and Roger Taylor says, "Not with those teeth, you're not," or something like that. Like, so we get the whole teeth thing,
right?
And the sucking on it seemed a little artificial and a little put on.
I did read. I mentioned this yesterday after we saw the movie, an interview with Rami Malek where he said that he had to wear the prosthetic for a while because he had to get used to it. And I'm like, yeah, you're not. You're still not used to it, bro.
You needed more time with the teeth.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe put them in before the first day of filming because.
But he was really good. He came across physically as Freddie Mercury.
Yeah,
I didn't see. I've seen enough Freddie Mercury interviews over my many years that I think that he didn't quite hit that in terms of the dialogue, in terms of that kind of thing, but the body language and everything like that, he very much hit it. And he has a physical presence very similar to Freddie Mercury. Like, his build is very similar, or at least he got into that sort of shape for the movie. So I thought physically he represented the role very well. And he looked the least like the band members of any of the four guys, I thought, anyway.
Yeah, me too, which is crazy because he did have the same kind of similar bone structure and similar coloring. And his eyes were similar and everything. There was a lot of similarities, but I could still see, it was like, that's not Freddie Mercury. Yeah, at the very end, over the closing credits, they actually have a performance of like the real Queen, and it was so crazy, like, whoa, is that Brian May or is that the guy who's playing Brian May? Right. Like, it's really Brian May, but they look so similar.
And Deacon looked a lot like the real Deacon, too. I think it's Brian Deacon, but a lot similar qualities there. So they did a good job in the casting. And the music was great, and the staging was great, and there was a lot of great about it, but it just didn't add up. Some of the parts were not there.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I was expecting... I love Queen, and I'd heard enough positive stuff about it, disregarding all of the, maybe they played a little fast and loose with the actual...
Well, it's a movie. It's a Hollywood movie.
Right. If you go to a movie to learn the truth about something,
it's not a documentary.
Right, exactly. It's not a documentary. So, disregarding how accurate it may or may not have been, I was still expecting to like it more than I did. And
I heard mediocre reviews. I heard good reviews about Malik playing the lead, playing Freddie Mercury. And then I heard the rest of it was sort of mediocre, and I thought, well, let's give it a try. And then when I read that Bryan Singer was the director, Bryan Singer, of course, being the director of one of my 30 movies in the top 10 of The Usual Suspects, which I just saw the other day, as a matter of fact, while I was ensconced in a hotel room while Coco was training for one of her many jobs. I thought, optimistically, well, Bryan Singer did such a great job with Usual Suspects that maybe he's going to turn this into something that's more than just a rock biopic. Mm-hmm. And it was a rock biopic. It was fine. It was good. It didn't blow me away.
Right.
And maybe I needed to be a bigger Queen fan, but you're a big Queen fan, and it didn't blow you away either.
Right. I would have actually liked more use of the songs, but then at the same time, there was a trailer for an Elton John movie that was called like a quote rock fantasy, that it looks like it was like he's singing Rocket Man and then everybody just starts levitating, and I was like, I don't know if like that's what Bohemian Rhapsody would have turned into if they would have used more of the music. Like, suddenly somebody to love, everybody's in like a field, and they're holding up candles or whatever. So.
Well, rock is such a trippy thing, right? Like, it's supposed to be a little bit surreal, and it's supposed to be a little bit fantastic. So, like Yellow Submarine, dating all the way back to Yellow Submarine, and on and on and on to all the movies that they've done, like The Doors. They're very, very well done rock movies that. You get that it's rock and roll. You get this, like, wait a minute, why are people levitating off the ground? That's not the way it works in real life.
Right, totally.
I don't believe this movie at all. Well, you're not doing drugs like the people that are in the movie supposed to be doing. So I understand all that part of it, but the part to me that was a little bit disjointed and I wanted to see more of was there's a scene where Freddie Mercury is writing a song when they're in the barn studio in remote England. Uh-huh. And in advance of one of their huge albums. And Freddie Mercury's sitting there in the room by himself, and he's going, oh, that's really good. And he's writing a song.
Yeah.
And to me, that would have been the more interesting stuff. Is how were these songs written?
Yeah.
Like where did Night at the Opera, the album? They talked a little bit about that. But the Bohemian Rhapsody, we don't really get a lot out of that other than Freddie Mercury was inspired by opera.
Yeah.
And maybe that's all there was. But for me, from somebody who's a craftsman of words, I would like to know what goes on behind the scenes. Like what is the muse there? What inspired them? What came, rather than just look at his face and say, "Oh, that's very good," and then he writes it down.
Yeah.
It's like, what is the song that he's talking about? What's the lyric? Where are we here? What's happening that is turned him around? Like, show me a flashback of him and his wife that he left because he wasn't feeling like he was completely heterosexual and she was uncomfortable with the situation. Like, do something there with that rather than just look at him and, "Oh yes, that's really good. I do say I have written." Of course, that's not the way he talks in the movie.
That would be awesome if that were.
"I do say, oh chaps, let's give it a good college try. Yes, what? Thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening." So that's my impression of a moment in Bohemian Rhapsody.
Awesome.
I've left you speechless with that.
Yeah, you totally have. I really don't know how to follow that up.
With that last bit of dialogue.
Yeah.
So should we go to the next movie that we double dipped on?
We should. That was what I was going to say. So we double dipped again yesterday, and of the two movies that we saw, I'm glad that we didn't pay to see Bohemian Rhapsody. Like, if we were going to pay for one of them, that's the one that I'm glad that we didn't pay for.
The way I like to think of it in my mind to sort of rationalize it all is we paid for both those movies.
Right.
It's just we paid a discounted rate.
Right.
So let's say we paid $18. I can't remember what it was. $18 for two movies. Well, we actually paid $18 for two movies. So for 4 tickets.
Yeah.
So let's say that's more than $4. It's like $4.25 or something like that.
Don't try to do math.
Yeah, I would try to do math.
We're going to do listeners.
Yes.
Use listeners.
Yeah.
There we go. That's what I want to say.
So that's the way I try to think about it. I try to rationalize it and say we're just paying a discounted rate.
Okay.
We're not ripping somebody off. So the first movie that we went to see before Bohemian Rhapsody was
Widows.
And what's the plot, Coco, of Widows?
So Liam Neeson is a member of a gang of crooks.
Ne'er-do-wells.
Yeah, like thieves in Chicago. And at the beginning of the movie, they get busted after a heist, and they all die. And their widows...
Not really a spoiler.
Yeah, not a spoiler at all.
No.
Their widows are left to pull off the next job.
There's blackmail involved.
That they were going to do. Yeah, there's blackmail involved.
Or else they wouldn't do it.
Right. The widows don't really want to do it, but...
And the widows don't have really any sort of crime background.
Right. Like, they're all tangentially aware of what their hubbies do, but they're not in the life. So they have to figure out how we're going to do this. And that's the rough outline of the movie. What did you think, Dolls?
Did you say that whether you liked it or not?
I did not know.
Okay, so I liked it a lot more than I liked Bohemian Rhapsody. Mm-hmm. I thought it was very well directed. Steve McQueen, not him of the, dead guy on a motorcycle from ages ago, Great Escape. That's not him. Different guy. British director who is doing really well. Did 12 Years a Slave. Fantastically directed. And also, the pace was really good. So there's a couple of scenes, I don't know if you noticed, where traditionally, so you'd have a two-shot where there's two people in the frame, and one of them looks at the other, and so then what happens is you go back and forth looking at the faces. Mm-hmm. And in this particular movie, we just saw in this case it was Viola Davis. She was looking at the camera, and then it just stayed there. Mm-hmm. And she was having her expressions facing the camera, and it was very, very awkwardly long. in terms of traditional Hollywood. Like usually it's back and forth, cut this, cut that, cut to this, cut to that. So where I'm going with this is there's a lot of different kinds of those things in the movie where it was untraditional. Like the scene where Colin Farrell and his assistant get into the car coming from a rally, and they get into the limo, and we don't see them in the limo, but we hear their voices talking, and it's a one shot. It's like they follow all the way along on, like, so the camera is affixed to the hood of the car, and we just see the panning of the neighborhoods that they're going. So they go from the poor neighborhood to the nice neighborhood. It goes from one side of the car to the other side of the car with a camera, and we're during the entire time we are hearing their voices, and we're hearing Colin Farrell argue with his assistant, who happens to be his lava. And I think that was really interesting too. So there's a lot of really interesting direction done there. It's like, okay, Colin, you're going to go in the car and we're not going to see you.
Yeah.
But you need to be irate. You need to be really torqued off. And then assistant lady, you need to be like telling him to stand up and be the quote unquote man and all that sort of stuff. So there was a lot of really interesting back and forth in that way, and a lot of creation there that you don't see, a lot of creativity, I should say. And the acting was fantastic. I thought that Colin Farrell and Viola Davis and a little bit of Liam Neeson was good, and some of the other Michelle Rodriguez was good. They were really good. So, but it still fell a little bit short to me because there was a couple of scenes where I think they were trying something and it didn't really work. Some of those protracted gaps and looking at the camera and that sort of thing. It brought the grade down for me a little bit. But overall, it was a really entertaining heist movie. And Coco, I've talked for like 5 solid minutes here about this movie. Please tell me your thoughts.
I thought it was outstanding.
Okay, good.
I would hardcore give it an A. Like,
yeah?
Yeah, I would definitely give it an A. Like you mentioned, all the performances were amazing. I did like, you were talking about the shot with the camera on the hood of the car and you don't actually see the people. I also liked how Steve McQueen played with a lot of shots. The camera isn't looking at them. The camera is looking at their reflections in a mirror or in a window. Yes. So kind of to underscore the fact that not everything is as it seems, especially for Viola Davis, like her character through the whole movie. I thought it was really smart. I thought it was gritty. Halfway through the movie, I thought, this is the kind of movie that's fronted by women that should be made.
Yeah, I agree.
Because whenever Hollywood makes a big deal about it's a movie with all women, you end up getting crap like the lady remake of Ghostbusters or
Ocean's 8.
Or another Sex and the City movie that Sarah Jessica Parker is dying to get made that nobody else in the world wants made. So stand down, SJP.
Wow, that's a scab that you just picked right off again.
This week they were back at it. They were talking about the script for Sex and the City 3. We could make another podcast about that, but we
don't want to go there.
No, we don't want to go.
We don't want to go there.
So nobody in the world wants that made, is all I'm saying. But that's the kind of crap you get when studios decide to make a movie for women. And this isn't a movie for women. It's a movie that just happens to be fronted by all women, and it was great. I cannot speak highly enough about it.
I absolutely agree with your assessment, and I absolutely agree with the fact that this happens to be a great movie that is the focal points of this movie are women.
Right.
So it's not like this artificial, let's remake something that was designed for guys,
right,
and put a bunch of women in it,
right,
and then it's going to be successful because it was guys doing it before. No, like this was a legitimate storyline. So you can't imagine this story being flipped.
Right.
So like a bunch of house dads are at home, and all of a sudden their crook wives, significant others are all killed, and so they got to go out and scramble. You know what I mean? Like there's a little bit of condescension, sexism there is like, are the women going to pull it off? Well, women can pull this stuff off just as easily as men. Right. So there was a little bit of that annoyed me. It's like, are they going to get their act together? And golly. But it was really well done. You didn't feel that in the movie. You going into the movie is like, I think there's a certain, Steve McQueen was playing a little bit on that for the audience. Knowing the audience was going to be like, are the women going to get this job done that the men couldn't do? Right. But it didn't have anything to do with that. It had everything to do with just a really good story.
And And it wasn't just like the gender part too. It was also class, because one of the ladies involved in the heist, you know, she works like a crummy job at a salon, and she ends up meeting another lady who's involved in the heist because she's babysitting her kids, and she has to run out on her own kids because she's like, hey, it's $12 an hour. I can't turn this job down. And then you've got Viola Davis, who's married to Liam Neeson, who's the ringleader. So they have the most money, but she says, well, I don't even own the apartment I live in.
Right.
Like, you know, she can't.
Well, she worked for the Board of Ed too.
Right. Yeah. She's
or
like,
she was the teachers union.
Yeah.
Sorry, the teachers union.
Yeah. So she's not pulling in a ton of cash.
She's not rolling
like,
in cash.
She can't afford to pay like their driver. So she's like, just keep the car. Just keep the car because I can't afford to pay you. So there's gender, there's class, there's, you know,
there's race.
There's race.
Yep.
One of the things I thought was, I mean, in addition to Viola Davis being married to Liam Neeson, which is, you in the States at least, you don't typically tend to see interracial like relationships.
Well, in the
like
opening
that.
shot is them in a passionate embrace, right?
Right. But also there's one scene, one of the ladies involved in the heist, she's a very stereotypically beautiful white woman. She's tall, she's thin, she's blonde. I mean, she's gorgeous.
She think it was 6'8" too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, she's gigantic. And she's abused by everybody in her life. Like her husband beats her, her mother hits her, like she's abused. And when Viola Davis not when she first talks to her, but like when they still don't know each other too well and they've only got like a few weeks to pull off the heist, like Viola Davis gets mad at her for something and slaps her, and the blonde lady like slaps her back, and that's the only time
after a beat.
Yeah, that's the only time she retaliates against anybody who abuses her in the whole movie. And I'm like, well, the argument could be made this is like a bridge too far. She's done with it, but also she didn't slap one of the white people who beat her. She slapped the black person who beat her. You know,
Yeah.
So I wondered if like race played into it there too.
Yeah, I never thought of that. Yeah,
and then also that blonde chick. I mean, she's gorgeous, like, just from the outside. There was
not as pretty as you, though.
Oh, my God, stop. So there was a lot of character development, too. It wasn't just like, oh, this tall blonde chick, oh, she...
Well, and like the Ocean's movies, like
right.
where the Ocean's movies, the guy movies anyway, because I didn't see Ocean's 8, the characters very much stay the same from beginning to end.
Right.
And we don't see that in this movie. They change, like that, like in real life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of depth to the blonde lady, and I know that I'm completely like stripping her of her humanity by calling her the blonde lady because I can't remember her name right off the top of my head.
Well, the crack staff in the studio, we actually gave them the day off today because it's Black Friday.
A holiday, right?
Yeah.
So, right, but it would be very easy to look at this person in real life and say she's tall, she's thin, she's gorgeous, you know, she has no problems, but no, she is abused by her husband and by her mother, and she's having to sell all her possessions because her husband left her with nothing, and she ends up resorting to being on one of those like sugar daddy websites to try to make some money, and she feels a connection to the guy she matches with, but then
But he abuses her in his own way, too.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, he's only interested in one thing. Even though he invites her to go on a work trip with him, like I think it's kind of implied that like, well, he's married and that's why they never go to his house. Like, this lady should have no problems at all because of the way she looks on the outside. But there was real development to show that, you know, the outside is the outside, but on the inside there's turmoil. And you know, a typical heist movie probably wouldn't show that. It would just be like, oh, the pretty blonde lady sitting in the bar with the guy who's buying her drinks because she's hot. You know? Like,
there was a lot of that in this movie. There was a lot of the subtlety I really liked. There was a lot of the, like you said, that you don't dwell a lot on the fact that this woman is abused, but it's obvious through the movie.
Right.
But it's not made obvious.
Right.
Let's put it that way. And I think that's Steve McQueen respecting the audience. He has a lot of respect for the audience in this movie because they pick up on those subtle things. It's not like we have this dramatic moment where we zoom in on the bruise on her eye.
Right.
And then there's music. And there's and her tearing up and you know, like all these ways that Hollywood would have treated that in different movies. And there's a way that he does it in the scene, and I'm not going to give it away because I thought it was really well done, with her boyfriend and how he treats that moment when he's still alive and they're still together. I thought that was very interesting. And all of a sudden you had what he does in that scene made him a villain to me instantly. And yet it was the scene lasted maybe 30 seconds.
yeah.
And so there was a lot of that subtlety, like you said. Like, this is a heist movie to the marketers of Hollywood. But to Steve McQueen and the actors in that movie, I don't think it's a heist movie.
No.
I think it's a movie about class. And like you said, I think it's about race. I think it's about, poor, rich and poor.
Right.
It's about Chicago as a city and the problems it's going through right now.
Right. It's about gender issues.
It's about gender issues.
It's like a psychological thriller too.
It's kind of a lot going on.
Yeah.
But it's not complicated. It's not like, I don't get what's going on here. Like, it's a very, the scene with Colin Farrell and Robert Duvall, who's his dad. And there's a lot of old politics slang going on there. And there was a very interesting dynamic there, and Colin Farrell, you almost want to sympathize with him in that scene, but then later on you don't. Like, it's just kind of this. The characters are complicated, like they are in real life.
Right. Yeah. There's a. So I read an interview in the Times. Well, before I get sidetracked, I want to say. We talked about all the performances being awesome, but Colin Farrell and Daniel Kaluuya, who was also in...
Yes, we haven't even talked about him yet.
Yeah, he was amazing.
He was great.
Oh, yeah, he was fantastic. I
hated that guy.
Oh my God, me too, right? Like, when he met his fate at the end of the movie, I was like, couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Yeah, right.
But anyways, so I was reading an interview in the Times with Gillian Flynn, who was, I didn't know this, she co-wrote the screenplay with Steve McQueen. She's also the author of Gone Girl, which I hated, and other...
Book or movie?
I hated the book.
I like the movie.
The movie I liked probably because I hated the book so much that I had low expectations for the movie.
I like the movie because Ben Affleck was in it, and I love everything that Ben Affleck is in.
What? Ben Affleck is awful, but that's a podcast for another time. So
I just wanted to get your reaction. I don't really believe that.
So she was talking about how when she published her first book in like 2006, because she always has like female protagonists, and all her books are really like kind of dark and twisted, and that wasn't the kind of book that was published about women in 2006.
Yeah,
in 2006, It was like, how many pairs of shoes can I afford to buy? And am I going to get the guy? And, I'm drinking another Cosmo. And
look how fabulous I am.
Right, yeah, totally. So I was really I don't remember where I was going with the Gillian Flynn thing, but...
You were astounded that she was involved. I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, I was really surprised to see that she was in it. Although I guess I probably shouldn't have been, because she does write female characters.
Right.
And, that's kind of her thing. Like, I remember what it was. One of the things about female characters, especially when Gone Girl came out, is that, like, they have to be likable at the very bottom of it. Like, everybody's flawed. Mm-hmm. Nobody's perfect. Mm-hmm. But you still have to have a likable female character. And there was, like, a whole big brouhaha around Gone Girl that I won't get into. But I thought that all the lady characters in Widows, I thought they were all likable.
Yeah.
Like, they were all flawed, as every human in the world is. But their flaws weren't like, I'm a homicidal sociopath, like Amazing Amy and Gone Girl was, Like, their flaws were just everyday flaws. And they're just trying to do the best that they can do in the circumstances that life has dealt them through no fault of their own.
Well, and I think that has a lot to do with reality. Like, that's a very good reflection of reality, is that there are people that struggle with things every day that we don't know about. That cliche, right? Like, you don't know what's going on behind people's eyes.
Right.
As you see them on the subway or in the grocery store or whatever, like, everybody's got something that they're dealing with.
Right.
And nobody is simple. Nobody is purely a villain. Nobody is purely a hero. I mean, that's just the way it is in real life. And I think that's absolutely correct, is that these women are struggling with these things. Tall blonde lady was struggling with some things. Michelle Rodriguez was struggling with some things. Mm-hmm. Viola Davis was struggling with things, but they were all very different things that they were struggling with. Right. And they also had some victories, too. I mean, they were, Michelle Rodriguez had kids that she loved and doted on and very much were the center of her life. Viola Davis didn't have kids in the movie, but there was another story around that is tragic.
Well, she had a dog.
She had a dog that very much looks like the real Coco.
Yes. That dog
and is actually
Westie,
a very key player represents a key moment in the movie.
There was a massive plot twist that I did not see coming.
You didn't see that coming?
I didn't see that coming, which I should have, because we discussed why I should have seen that coming last night. I won't give that away for our listeners, even though I do tend to spoil things. But that plot twist was basically announced by the dog.
Right, right. And there's some foreshadowing in there. So this is another one of those rare movies where you can watch it again and get just as much, if not more, out of it the second time.
Right,
so
totally.
again, like earlier we were talking about Bryan Singer's The Usual Suspects. This to me is the classic watch it again movie, and then like, oh yeah,
yeah, totally.
And then you're putting all the pieces together, and you've seen the scene where it's Kaiser Soze and it's not Kaiser Soze, and
Right.
is it really Kevin Spacey? Who is it, and what's going on? This is not on that same level, but there's very much those kinds of clues as you go along, and you see what's going on behind the scenes. It's like, oh yeah, I can see why that happened. I mean, hindsight is 20/20,
Right.
but at the same time, it's not unintentional in a movie. These
Right.
are things. These are little pieces of popcorn on the trail that are laid down intentionally by the director.
And also, speaking of, with Viola Davis's wardrobe, in the beginning, she's wearing a whole lot of white.
Right.
And then as the movie goes along, she starts wearing
Right.
like darker colors.
I never noticed that. Right.
And in the movie, in the scene that we're talking about with the dog heralding this plot twist, she's wearing red.
Yep.
It's like bright scarlet
Wow.
letter red. And then by
Very
the
good, yeah.
end, she's back in the more muted, like neutrals.
And
Like she's not fully white, but in the very last scene, when she finally smiles for the first time in the whole freaking movie,
Yes.
she's in
Yes.
kind of like a very light beige.
Yes,
So
yes.
I did notice that too, like the wardrobe choices that were made throughout the whole movie for her character specifically. I didn't really notice the rest.
That was very observant of you, and I noticed
Yeah.
it. I didn't notice the pattern, but I noticed when she was meeting with the fourth widow at the restaurant, she decides not to get her involved.
Yeah.
She's wearing black and white.
Yeah.
And that is very significant. Again, we won't spoil the plot, the twist in the plot there, but that's a very significant moment as well because of what she's wearing. And that's literary type stuff. Like that's perhaps a Gillian Flynn influence. I don't know, but
Right.
that was very intriguing. That's very, very good observation.
Which author was it who said, like, sometimes a black hat is just a black hat?
Right.
Not in this movie.
Not in this movie.
No, this movie with this character, everything she wears is deliberate.
And so that's why it speaks to what we were talking about earlier, is there's a lot going on in this movie.
Right.
It's not just a heist movie.
Right.
It's not just a movie that's filmed with a certain amount of depth. You've got to pay attention to the wardrobe. You've got to pay attention to facial expressions by the lead characters.
Right.
All that sort of stuff. So it's a very engaging and also a good movie to see on the big screen.
Yes.
Bohemian Rhapsody was probably good because of the sound, but to me the visuals weren't. They didn't need to be on a big screen. I mean, I needed to be in a theater to hear that music,
Right.
but not in the same way for the visuals.
Right, yeah. The only reason I'm glad we saw Bohemian Rhapsody in the theater was for that final Live Aid recreation.
Right.
Like, that was fantastic.
Right.
But the rest of that movie, I could have seen it on Netflix.
Yeah.
Like, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
So, Widows, I hardcore give an A. I recommend everybody out there go see it right now on your holiday weekend. Like, take 2 hours and go watch this movie because it is utterly fantastic.
So is this the best movie that we've ever reviewed in terms of Coco and Dalt's, the podcast?
I would,
For you?
I would say for sure.
Yeah, you're praising this up pretty good.
I do. I liked it a whole lot. I would definitely go back and watch it again.
And I'm thinking it's not because of the 4 bottles of wine you had before the podcast.
I had 7 ounces of wine. I will have you know. I have my measuring cup and everything. I know exactly how much I had.
Sorry, I'm mistaken. It was me who had 7 cans of beer before the podcast.
Well, you're still pretty lucid, so I think.
Well,
yeah.
I get more lucid the more beer I have.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
So the final thing we want to touch on today does tie into Widows, and we went in this order deliberately.
Yes, we did.
So the tall blonde lady, whose name that we cannot remember.
And our crack staff, we're giving them the break. So
Right. She was married to, or was it her or was it Michelle Rodriguez? It was the blonde lady?
it was Michelle Rodriguez.
Michelle Rodriguez.
Yep.
Was married to a guy whose name we don't know. He was in the movie for maybe 5 minutes total. He wasn't like Liam Neeson, who kept appearing in flashbacks, but he also appeared in season 2 of Goliath, which
As the butcher of Mexico.
I'm just, since you started off talking about Widows, I'm going to start off talking about season 2 of Goliath. It was awful. I really enjoyed season 1 of Goliath. Season 2, I did not even watch the final 2 episodes because I really didn't care about the plot line, and it was gruesome. There were a lot of amputations for non-medically necessary reasons. And yeah, I really didn't care. And this season 2 of Goliath came out in August, I think. And we binge watched the first few episodes over a couple of days when it came out. And then I just stopped. I was like, nah, I'm good. I don't need to watch anymore. And Daltz finally finished up watching it a few weeks ago. And what did you think?
I can't leave anything uncompleted. Even though I completely agreed with you on the quality of it. So Goliath is the Amazon series starring Billy Bob Thornton,
who does do a good job in both seasons.
He does a very good job.
He's a very good.
He's the anchor, and the characters are still very good. Even the terrible villains in season 2 were very complicated. We were talking about complicated characters earlier. They were also very complicated. I like that. The writing was still very good, but the gruesomeness was off the charts.
Yeah,
and so. I'm not a prude on the gruesomeness, but I need a little bit of context because season 1 didn't have very much gruesomeness at all.
Right.
It was not a gruesome movie, or a gruesome series, I should say. I really liked the acting in the first season. I really liked the characters again. And I was thinking all the same people are back in the second season. This is going to be good. And then it just took a gruesome turn. And so that was distracting to me.
Yeah,
it distracted away from all the other good qualities. Like the main villain is the candidate for mayor, or is she the villain? Like, that's a complicated part of it. Candidate for mayor for L.A., and her and Billy Bob get together, and there's some interesting back and forth there. But the gore and the blood and the depravity of it all, just brought it all the way down for me. And you missed the last two. You intentionally did not see the last two episodes. I had to finish it, and I was like, at one point I had to get up off the couch while the movie was still going. Well, I didn't push the pause button on the Amazon, and I walked away.
Oh man!
And went into the kitchen and had a drink, and did a shot of something, and then came back to the couch, and it was. Now, maybe that was intentional. Maybe the producers and the director wanted that kind of reaction. But it was just shock value off the charts. It was unnecessary to me.
I said this to you before, and now I will say it on the podcast. After the end of the first season, when they announced that it was renewed for a second season, I said, how are they going to do this every season?
Right.
Because he can't every season take on big pharma, big agriculture, big whatever, and win every season or lose every season. He can't do this every season. So when we watch...
This is not a John Grisham storyline.
Right, exactly. So the first couple episodes of season 2, it seemed like it was shaping up to be just like your run-of-the-mill, TV procedural. Because there was a
Law
kid...
and Order.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's a kid who's falsely accused of murder, and Billy Bob's, got to get him off because he's friends with the kid's dad. And I was like, oh, okay, well, this is one way to keep him from taking on big pharma every season is just to do a run-of-the-mill, Matlock type thing or whatever, right? But then...
I would go to see that. Billy Bob Thornton is Matlock?
Oh, my God, that would be
reboot?
And I would have totally preferred Billy Bob as Matlock versus just the complete, suit. Off-the-rails way this season went.
This was Law and Order... medically unnecessary amputations unit.
Right, totally. It was, and it sucks because Billy Bob is so good, and then and here I go not remembering a blonde lady's name again. But
she was great.
Yeah, the lady who plays his blonde assistant, she's sassy.
Yeah,
but she's troubled, and
she just says whatever comes into her mind, which I love.
Yeah, she's so good, and she's getting together with
former hooker is really good.
Yeah,
and Paul Williams is good.
Right, the core characters from season 1, their performances were fantastic, but it's just it just went. The writers were like, "How are we going to top season 1?" And they just started throwing everything against the wall with drug mules and amputations. And I'm like, I tapped out. I'm like, I'm done.
Well, I'm wondering if studio got involved here, and to a certain point, creativity by committee ends up being terrible. So it was we're going along, and maybe that was after the 5th episode. They're like, okay, we need something different. And that was different. I mean, it was...
Let's just bob at everybody. You know?
Right. Like, it was just... To me, I know you don't feel the same way, but it was the Stranger Things Season 2 to me. Stranger Things Season 2 was still relatively good compared to this Goliath Season 2. But it was the same as Season 1 to me. It was like the mystery was gone.
Yeah.
Because we knew what 11 was all about. And there was this and there was that were just kind of... It was just kind of mediocre. And so now I'm out of Stranger Things. Like, it would have to be spectacular for me to see Stranger Things 3. Even though the performances were still really good.
Right.
I liked a lot of the plot and everything like that. But there was that odd episode where they had the
11 went to Chicago. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, 11 went to Chicago.
Oh, we're going back to Chicago with widows.
Chicago, there you go. Like, but that was that whole thing where all of a sudden it was like Suicide Squad set up or something like that. They were setting up a split,
spin-off.
The spin-off, thank you. And so that was tangential. And now we're going with Goliath with the mad amputator, and it just didn't seem right. So now I'm out of Season 3 Goliath. Like,
oh wow,
if they come back, like, my time is too valuable to get involved, because it's not just one episode. Like, when you watch TV these days, because there's availability of all the episodes, it's not like you can watch it on a Tuesday. And then if you don't like it, you just don't watch it the next Tuesday.
Right.
Whereas if it's in your queue, it's sort of sitting there nagging you. It's like, Season 2 is finished. Season 2. Watch me, watch me, watch me.
See, I didn't dislike Stranger Things Season 2 as much as you did. Like, it was a letdown from Season 1, but I didn't hate it. Like, Season 1 was like an A. I'd give Season 2 like, B minus.
Oh, yeah.
You know. So I'm going to watch Stranger Things Season 3. I'll watch Goliath Season 3. But even though I missed like the last 2 episodes of Season 2, but if either one of those seasons is bad for me, then I'm out. I'm not going to watch Season 4 or either one of them.
But you're able to do that. You're able to bail on stuff where I'm not able to bail. Yeah. If I start, I got to finish the story. So to me, it's more like, okay, you've committed a crime for me in these 2 seasons. I can't go to Season 3, because if I watch the first 2 episodes of Season 3, then I'm probably going to have to watch all 10 episodes.
Right. But that's
whereas you can just bail.
That's the good thing about the streaming seasons, is they're only 10 seasons. It's not like network TV where you're in it for 20 to 24 episodes. Right. You know, it's 10 episodes. They're anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes a piece. Sure. And just like with Goliath Season 2, like, I was like, yeah, you know what? I don't really need to watch the last couple episodes. Like, I'm good. Like, I might even not finish the whole season if it's awful.
See, it was nagging to me. It was like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? I got to find out what's going to happen.
And instead, you just watch like a whole lot more amputations.
And I regretted it. But I finished it. So now it's not sitting in the queue going, you're going to watch me. You're going to watch me.
All right, fist bump.
So I want to close with, I just hope that you won't bail on our love like you've bailed on Goliath and other shows that you did not like.
You bailed on your marriage, so I think there we go.
I did not. I did not. Well, we're going to edit that part out.
That's the 7 ounces of wine talking right there.
Okay.
On that note.
And if you've made it this far, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Coco and Daltz. For another week, I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Daltz.